description. As you probably are aware from having looked at the text now for all this time, the Gita can be described at the very general, broad level as having two basic aims. One of these is just to describe what reality is like, to describe what the ultimate structure of the universe is like, what its fundamental constituents are, how those interrelate with one another, what things truly are. The second major aim of the Gita is to tell us what that means for us as human beings. What are we supposed to do about the way the world is structured? And as you can see, those two interrelate. I need to know what the universe is like before I can figure out what my response to that structuring of the universe is supposed to be. But that is pretty normal. Most religions do tell us what the world is like from the viewpoint of that religion, and then what our personal response is supposed to be. So let's take each of those in turn. First of all, what is reality for the Hindu worldview, specifically the variant of it that we get in the Bhagavad Gita? The main component, in fact the only component of reality, according to the purest Hindu worldview, is the divine, is God. And that's somewhat misleading at first glance, to put it that way, because when we think of God, we have a tendency to think of the Judeo-Christian God, a personal being who has consciousness, who has knowledge, who stands apart from the world that this God has created, looks down on it, has feelings and relationship with parts of it. That is not what the divine is for Hinduism. For Hinduism, the divine is everything that exists. It is the ultimate transcendent reality that is out there in the world. It is absolute. It does not stand apart from the world and look down on it. It is the world. It is the world, though, in two different senses. It is the world in a sense that is not at all manifest. And that would be the sort of language that you're used to seeing in the Gita. The Gita keeps talking about unmanifest things becoming manifest. And it really is alluding to some of these features of the Hindu divine when it does so. So, the Hindu divine, the Hindu God, also known, as you're aware now, as Brahman, and the actual Sanskrit way to pronounce this is Brahman. The Hindu divine, Brahman, has two major natures, and one is this unmanifest nature. It just is this sort of vast, divine, lumpy experience, reality that has no distinctions, that has no characteristics. There are no details. It is just this kind of awe-inspiring, undistinguished reality. The other side of Brahman, the other major facet of Brahman, is the manifest component of Brahman. The manifest component of Brahman does have distinctions, does have details, does have characteristics, does have features. And very likely you're thinking now, as you may have been thinking over the past 2+ weeks, how can one divine have two radically contradictory characteristics? How can it be unmanifest, no details, nothing that can be directly experienced, no characteristics, no parts, and then on the other hand, have these details, these characteristics, these parts? That's a central question that we'll come back to, but it's one of the major things that lets you know that Hinduism has a very radically different way of structuring human beings' knowledge, human beings' relationship to the universe than we are used to. Very briefly, we in the West are used to saying you have to make a logical choice between either this or that way of looking at things. You can't have two contradictory descriptions of reality that hold true simultaneously. And that's what logic is for us. That's what rationality is for us. For the world of the Gita, for Hinduism, rationality has a very different characteristic. Rationality is both and. Rationality is syncretistic. Syncretistic means something that is syncretized. It's something that has brought together features from broadly different theoretical origins, something that has very different theoretical features, brings them together into one new whole that does not obliterate either of the major features that you were dealing with before when you were looking at those two broad theoretical realms that you started with. So we've got both Brahman's unmanifest nature and its manifest nature. They seem to our Western rationality to contradict with one another, but again, as we'll be explaining later, to the Hindu mind, to the Hindu worldview, rationality means bringing these two together and seeing how reality does have what look at first to be contradictory characteristics, and yet those can be held together in one. And ultimately, it is the divine, it is Brahman that holds them together into one. And so this is one of the main things about reality that we need to understand. We need to understand that reality has these, broadly speaking, two apparently different features, all combined into one great big, ineffable, non-characterized divine, and then on the other hand, being able to be broken down into characteristics. We can bring those two things together, and realizing that helps us to understand what reality is like. So, Brahman appears in everything in both its unmanifest form, in the form that has no details, has no characteristics, is just the great big of existence, of divinity. And then also appears in everything in its detailed, manifest, characterized form. And in that second form, the characterized, manifest, detailed form, we see Brahman all around us. Your fingernails are parts of Brahman. They are parts of the detailed, manifest, characterized Brahman. The chair, the floor, the ceiling, everything around us, whether it seems from our first perspective to be a high or a low feature of reality. An animated, human, animalistic form of reality, or an inert, material form of reality, or a morally good form of reality, or a morally bad form of reality, an aesthetically desirable or an aesthetically disgusting form of reality. All of these are equally parts of Brahman. Brahman, in its manifest form, is everything. And you'll probably think back now to some of those passages you encounter in the Gita, talking about how the sage, the disciplined man of understanding, makes no distinctions between a criminal, a woman, a dog, any of these very differently valued aspects of reality. And this is one of the main reasons why. In fact, it is the reason why. Because everything, whether it's something you would ordinarily plug your nose at or clap up and down with delight and joy at, all of these are equally parts of Brahman. Brahman in its manifest, characterized form. So, Brahman has these two natures, and Brahman is also what animates the world, what gives it all of its characteristics, especially in the manifest form of Brahman. It does this. And yet it does this without changing itself, especially in the unmanifest form. It is quite clear that Brahman is changeless. And that's, of course, one of the features that does correlate to the Christian understanding of God. We're used to thinking of God as changeless, as eternal, as inexhaustible, and yet at the same time we always say that God is outside the universe, separate from the world that we experience, looking down on it, acting on it. And the Gita does not say that. The second major thing to know about Brahman, and now I'm moving beyond talking about these two major features, the unmanifest and the manifest. The second major thing to know about Brahman is the relationship that Brahman has to each of us as individuals. And as you know, from having looked at the Gita, ultimately, deep down inside, as it were, each one of us is Brahman. Except the word, the concept that Hinduism uses for that is Atman. So within myself, at a level that is sometimes difficult for me to realize, difficult for me to experience, there is the Atman self, and that is Brahman. It's a different side, though, of Brahman. Brahman, as we were first discussing it, kind of hard to know whether to give it a personal kind of pronoun, because it really does seem like a more it-like God, since it doesn't have its personal features. Brahman, as we were first discussing it, has both the unmanifest and the manifest nature, but in either case we're talking about the facts about Brahman outside of us. Even if I had never existed, Brahman would have both this unmanifest and this manifest form. So Brahman, in the way we were discussing it first, is the objective side of divinity. And by objective, what we mean, again, is something outside my experience, something that will remain exactly as it is, regardless of whether or not I ever come to know it, take any position on it, etc. The Atman side of Brahman, what each of us carries around inside ourselves, deep down inside ourselves, at a level that is very difficult, according to the Gita, for us to recognize. The Atman side of us might be described as the subjective part of Brahman. This is the Brahman that I carry around within me. And the distinction between objective and subjective is slightly misleading insofar as it might lead you to think, well, my coming to experience this Atman, this Brahman side within me changes it. No, that's not the case. But it is a Brahman with which I am identified. So it's subjective in that sense. It is me. So, going back then to the first thing that I said about the Gita. One thing that we're supposed to know about from the Gita is what reality is like. The other thing we're supposed to know about the Gita is what we're supposed to do about it once we realize what reality is like. The major thing that we're supposed to do about it is to recognize, to come to recognize that we are Atman. That Atman is deep down inside me, that Atman is deep down inside you, and of course that is ultimately the same thing as recognizing that Brahman is deep down inside me. Now, according to the Gita, that is a very difficult undertaking. Coming to recognize that you are Atman, that you are the subjective form of Brahman, is apparently a very hard task. And so the Gita takes a long time, takes 18 different teachings to lead us through a description of how we might come to truly understand that we are Atman deep down inside ourselves. And you might think, well, you just described it to me. I've been thinking about it. Okay, I understand. According to the Gita, I'm Atman deep down inside. But no, just saying that, just saying, well, I've learned that, I can write it on my final paper and get an A in responsible self as a result. Just being able to say that doesn't count as knowing it. What that counts as is just some sort of lip service, just some sort of, I've figured out how to fill out the right little square on a multiple choice exam. According to the Gita, truly understanding that I am Atman underneath is hard as heck. It is so hard that one lifetime is highly unlikely to enable me to understand it. I am much more likely to require, I'll just pick a number, 68 different full 70-year lifespans to even start to get close to realize that I am Atman underneath. And as you know, the Gita does have a doctrine of samsara, of reincarnation, of multiple lives that one must live through in order to even become closer to understanding that I am Atman deep down inside, that I am Brahman deep down inside, and of course the same for you. Why should that be so hard to realize? Well, think back to all of the things that we were saying about Brahman before. Ultimately, what you have to do is not only realize that reality in general is this one all-pervading, divine thing. Thing doesn't even seem like the right word, but it's very hard to find words for Brahman. And there's a good reason for that. Brahman is not the kind of thing that in its unmanifest form has any characteristics, so how could language ever describe it? How could concepts ever bring us nearer to it? How could ordinary thinking ever bring us nearer to it? And yet, we do think, we do have feelings, we do have a tendency to describe things in language, to break down reality in that way. So given that, it's going to be very hard for us to understand what Brahman as a whole is, and then even more difficult to understand, having seen that Brahman is everything, that somehow that everything is also me, deep down underneath. In fact, again, it is so difficult, it may very well take 68 lifetimes to do it. And even then, you might only be half of the way, have to live another 68 lifetimes. So it's very important as a result that the Gita not only tell us something about what this vision would be like, but that it also tells us something about what kind of techniques, what kind of practical techniques we can pursue in order to try to come to have that ultimate vision of Brahman as the ultimate reality and Brahman as the Atman deep within us. So, bear that in mind, and I'm going to take a discursus for a moment to lay the foundation for how it is that those techniques might actually work. As you're no doubt aware by now, Brahman generates the world according to its Maya, which is a word that basically means magic, the sort of emanations that come out of Brahman as Brahman is generating the world, creating the world. And this Maya both generates the world as it really is, but also, as magic tends to do, creates a world of illusion at the same time. It's a world of illusion because it gives rise to the surface experiences, the details, the different characteristics that we encounter, all of the different features, especially of the manifest form of Brahman, all of those different characteristics, the greenness of the chair, its nuttiness, the smoothness of your skin, the person breathing next to you. Those are elements of reality, but they're also illusions insofar as they keep you focused on specific elements around you, detailed individual characteristics of things around you, and prevent you from seeing that there is a whole that is the summation of all of those characteristics, and ultimately that there is a whole that transcends all of those characteristics, the unmanifest form of Brahman. So, Brahman is sending out this Maya that generates the world in all of its details in Brahman's manifest form. And three of the major things that Brahman sends out are the so-called qualities of nature. And you'll remember having come across all kinds of descriptions in the Gita of the qualities of nature. The qualities of nature, as my students are probably sick of hearing, in Sanskrit is, the word is guna, gunas. And that literally means qualities, the qualities of nature. And there are three different major gunas. Again, these are emanations from Brahman's Maya. And these gunas, these three major qualities of nature, can also be understood as psychological tendencies that make up important parts of who you are as a human being. Hinduism sees you as having quite a number of different aspects as a human being, and I am not going to bore you by belaboring all of the details, but two of the major details are your actual physical body and then your psychological self. And you're used to the Western tradition making something like that same kind of distinction. We've got a physical body, and then we've got an immortal soul. The Gita does not break it down that way, because it says we've got the physical body, we've got the psychological self, and then, of course, underneath it all there is the Atman. That's the closest we're ever going to come in Hinduism to an immortal soul. And obviously there are real differences there, because in Christianity, the immortal soul is a creation of God, whose job, as Augustine describes it in the Confessions, is to come to greater knowledge of God, greater devotional communion with God, and will thereby be able to return to God, to live with God throughout eternity. For Hinduism, Atman is God. And it's eternal, all right, but that's not because there is some separate piece of you, psychologically, that's eternal. It's because fundamentally, your psychological experiences aren't really who you are. Fundamentally, it's Brahman, who you really are. So, there are these three different gunas, these three different psychological components, these three different psychological realities and qualities of nature, and they construct who you experience yourself as being, intellectually, emotionally, aesthetically, how you're motivated to do things in the world. The three different gunas are, and there is a hierarchy here, so I'm starting at the top and working down. First of all, sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A, or as Barbara Stoller-Miller translates it regularly, lucidity. And lucidity is the guna, the psychological orientation that predisposes a person to an interest in knowing things. It predisposes a person to purity. So lucidity is a word that means clarity, light, understanding, and that is why the Sanskrit word sattva, which literally means truth, has been translated this way. So somebody who has the knowledge, lucidity guna predominating is going to find it pretty easy to care about knowing more about the world in general and perhaps even knowing more about Brahman, ultimately. And that's why this guna is at the top of the hierarchy. It is, so to speak, the best guna for coming to achieve moksha, which, as you know, means the Hindu version of salvation, and ultimately that is release from all of these irritating reincarnated lives you keep being stuck into. Release into oneness with Brahma. So sattva helps you to achieve that. The second guna, and now we're moving down the list, is rajas. And rajas is the guna that is associated with passion. Sorry? Oh, R-A-J-A-S. Rajas. And that is the guna that is associated with passion or with desire. If you're a passionate person, if you desire things, what's the likely outcome of your having that psychological orientation? You're going to do stuff. You're going to act in the world to try to achieve what it is that you desire. You desire $1 million. What are you going to do? You're going to major in business. You're going to go out and found your first company by the time you're 25, and you're going to try to rake in the cash. You're going to be acting in a way that is oriented toward achieving your desire. Now, there are some possible benefits, according to the Gita, for having the passion guna predominating. Also some possible deficits. Possible benefit. You are likely to act in a way that brings you closer to the desire of achieving moksha, the desire of moving up the caste system, the desire of coming to know Brahman and be reunited with Brahman by recognizing that you are Atman deep down underneath. Possible deficit, and it's a biggie. Desire prevents you from achieving moksha. Desire prevents you from achieving oneness with Brahman. Why does it do this? Well, one of the other major terms besides samsara, the reincarnative cycle, coming back into multiple lives, and moksha, being released from samsara into oneness with Brahman, a oneness that you actually structurally had all along because you're Atman deep down underneath, but you didn't realize it, so it prevents that complete oneness from happening. One of the other terms that you're probably familiar with by now is karma. And karma is what you build up by doing either morally good or morally bad actions in the world. Morally good or morally bad with reference to, yes, yet another term, dharma. Dharma being your duty. So, and that's D-H-A-R-M-A. If you're fulfilling your duty, according to the Hindu worldview, and we'll come back and talk about what that actually entails, if you're fulfilling your duty, then you're building up good karma. If you are avoiding doing your duty, or doing your duty badly, but still it's much worse to avoid doing your duty, you're building up bad karma. So good karma, bad karma. What kind of functioning does karma have? We might have a tendency to think of it as something that maybe a personal God or divine committee doles out to us, keeping a list like Santa Claus of all the good and bad things we've done in our lives, and then when we die saying, you've got a negative 5,000 bad karma score, and so we have decided to assign you a hell position in the afterlife. For us, when we think about how morality works, we tend, in our Santa Claus imagination, to understand it as something that some divine being has to evaluate and then process us accordingly as a result. That is not the way Hinduism sees it. For Hinduism, karma is almost a scientific law of cause and effect. Things happen to you as a direct, immediate, and I don't mean immediate in the sense of boom, it happens in the next sentence. I mean there's no mediator. Nobody makes it happen. It happens of itself. There is a direct and immediate effect for every cause that you, by your actions, put into the universe. So if you act in a morally good way, you build up morally good karma, and the result of that is various things that we'll come back to later on. If you act in a morally bad way, you build up bad karma, and the result of that is poop. So it's just like if you have some litmus paper, you stick it in an acid solution, you don't have to say, I'm going to make that turn, and now I have no clue because I'm not a chemist, either pink or blue. You don't make it turn a certain color. It does that automatically on its own. Karma works the same way. Okay, so back to the Rajas guna. What has this got to do with it? If you are a passionate person, a desiring person, you're doing a lot of actions. And you're doing actions trying to achieve a certain kind of result. That means you are building up lots of karma. Good karma maybe, bad karma maybe, but you're building up karma. Obviously, it's better to have good karma than to have bad karma, but ultimately, according to the Gita, the very best thing is to have no karma at all. Why? Because if you have bad karma, you're going to get, scientifically, as it were, just by this law of cause and effect, reincarnated in a way that really stinks. You are going to get reincarnated lower down the caste system. So let's say that you are, like Arjuna, one of the main two characters in the Bhagavad Gita, let's say that you are a warrior. You're from the warrior class, the warrior caste. You are a kshatriya, and you don't perform your duty. And as you know, Krishna, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, keeps flogging poor Arjuna, saying, gotta do your duty, gotta do your duty. Your own duty done badly is better than another man's duty done well. So it's very important, Arjuna, that you ride off into battle and kill your cousins, because that is what your duty requires, even though you don't want to do it. If Arjuna refuses to do that, he's going to build up bad karma, and he is going to be reincarnated not at the second level of the caste system, where he is now. There are Brahmins at the top, the priestly class. The kshatriyas, the warriors, are the second level, still a pretty darn good level to be at. Arjuna, if he screws up, is going to be reborn way down the caste system. He might be reborn at the untouchable level, at the outcast level. That's so sucky, it's not even in the caste system, per se. It is the lowest level, it is outside the caste system. He might be reborn even more lowly than that. He might come back as a cockroach or as a dog. Part of the whole idea of samsara is that you might very well get reincarnated as an animal, and especially if it is one of the culturally lowly animals, not good. On the other hand, let's say that Arjuna does follow Krishna's advice. He rides into battle. He does his best, even though he's got some real trepidation about this battle, to fight as a warrior. But he does so the whole time with desire, with attachment, with passion. And the Rajas guna, the action guna, the second of the three gunas, predisposes you to acting with passion. So it's very likely that even if Arjuna does fulfill his duty, he acts, he goes to war, he's going to do so with a sense of attachment. I hope I can win this war. I hope that I can win this war without screwing up my family system. I know my cousins are really going to be ticked off at me. How will my mother ever forgive me for killing her nephews, etc.? If he does so with this kind of attachment, he is, no matter how well he does his duty, building up karma. And even if it's good karma, he's just going to get reincarnated again. He might come back as a Brahmin. Better than being a kshatriya. He's now up one level. But it's not as good as achieving the ultimate goal of the Gita, the ultimate goal of Hinduism, which is release from samsara altogether. And for release from samsara, for achieving moksha, you have to learn to act without any attachment at all. You have to do your duty, but you have to act without attachment to your duty. For someone with the Rajas guna, this is hard. It's hard because they are, just psychologically, by virtue of the Maya, Brahman's magic that predominates in them at the psychological level, they can't help an awful lot of the time, unless they really work at it, acting with attachment, acting with passion, and acting with desire. So they're worse off than the people who have lucidity in them, because they've got this strong tendency toward desire. It might help them act in good ways, but it's going to keep them attached, keep them building up karma. So we're working on the gunas here. We're working on the Maya that creates your psychological self. We've got sattva, lucidity, which inclines you toward knowledge. We've got rajas, passion, desire, obviously. As a kshatriya, Arjuna has a great deep inhelping of rajas in him. And then the third guna, down at the bottom of the scale, again it's a hierarchy, we're going down, is tamas, T-A-M-A-S. Tamas is the Sanskrit word that Barbara Stoller-Miller keeps translating as dark inertia. Dark inertia means laziness, dullness, sleepiness, torpidity, negligence. Somebody who's got tamas predominating in their psychological guna self has a very strong inclination to sit around doing nothing. These are the lazy people. And people who are lazy are going to find it even harder than people like Arjuna, who've got the passion guna predominating, to achieve moksha. Why are they going to find it harder? Well, because they can't really be bothered very easily to do their duty. And you'll remember, the main thing one needs to do in order to get out of samsara and achieve moksha is to do your duty without attachment to the fruits, without attachment to the results. Somebody who's having a hard time doing their duty can't even get on the ground floor with that one. So you can see then how there really is this hierarchy. The knowledge guna helps people know Brahman, go straight to that. The passion guna helps people do their duty, perhaps, it at least helps them act, but they're going to have a real problem with attachment to their duty. The tamas guna makes it hard to even do anything at all. And according to Hindu lore, each one of us has all three of these in us. However, they are not equal in us. Each one of us has some different combination of them. And the combinations are understood to vary according to the caste system. So if you're a Brahmin, if you're part of the priestly class, you have just naturally been born with sattva predominating in you, and the other two in lesser amounts. If you're in the kshatriya class, you have just been born with action, passion, desire predominating in you. Still some sattva, still some interest in knowledge and truth, otherwise we wouldn't have Arjuna carrying on this lengthy conversation with Krishna for 18 teachings, but it's not as predominant in you as his action. And if you're down at the bottom of the caste system, this is one of the main ways, as far as I can tell, that Hinduism justifies to itself this caste system. You're down there because you're just a lazy butt anyway, and so you kind of deserve to be there, but wouldn't it be nice if you could find a way to get out of that? So you've got tamas predominating in you. So far, what we've been saying is that God, Brahman, has structured you at the surface psychological level, the level most of us experience because we're still working on our 68 lives where we're going to realize we're Atman underneath. You are structured in such a way that you either are moved closer to moksha, are having a hard time with detachment, or are sinking further away from moksha because you're just sitting around being lazy and negligent. The cool thing about the Gita is that it doesn't rest there. It doesn't say, if you're already doing well, things are going to get better. If you're screwed, things are going to get screweder. Instead, it says that for each one of these predominating psychological personality types, there's both a difficulty and a possible path to enlightenment. It's pretty easy to see what the possible path to enlightenment is for somebody who has the truth, lucidity, sattva guna predominating. They just have to keep working on knowing Brahman, knowing Atman. However, they have to be wary of, there's a difficulty for them as well, being attached to knowledge. Because, again, discipline, the overall technique, you have to find a way to get going for yourself. Discipline is doing your duty without attachment to the fruits. So wanting things, and that makes it hard to be detached. We've already talked about what the strengths and weaknesses are for the rajas guna, the passion guna. Strength, it helps you act possibly in the right way. Weakness, it's going to keep you attached through passion to the results, the fruits of your acts. For the tamas guna, for the poor people who are just psychologically stuck at the bottom of the hierarchy, pretty clear what the difficulties are for them. But there's also a possibility for them, and this is the way of devotion. There are three major yogas, three major disciplinary tracks, disciplinary meaning ways you can become disciplined, that are spoken of in the Gita. The path of knowledge, obviously that goes with the lucidity people. The path of action, obviously that goes with Arjuna and the other passion, desire, action people. And then the path of devotion. And this is one that's going to be easiest for the tamas, lazy people to pursue. Devotion is all about meditation. It's about sitting there saying Om, which is that syllable that calms the mind, that helps clear you to understand better that you are Atman, but that is also the syllable, the word most fully associated with Brahman. All words are Brahman, just again, like the chair is Brahman, your fingernails are Brahman. But Om is the word that most fully is Brahman. Anyway, so if you are a devotional person, if you are meditating, you don't have to act. You don't have to know. You just sit around and try to feel Brahman. You can be lazy, you can be sleepy, you can be negligent, and still be devoted to Brahman. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that you can be negligently devotional, but I'm saying that for a negligent person, a lazy person, this is going to be a much easier way for them to access Brahman than would be reading 5,000 scholarly books, doing 5,000 prescribed duties. So you can work on being more devotional, and in that way can come to know Brahman almost, again there are differences, but almost in a way that we can understand from the Christianity side of things. We're used to an internal piety, one that says, I want to get close to Jesus Christ. Something like that is offered to tamas guna people as their alternative way to Brahman. As you know, Krishna is the incarnation of Brahman, just as for us as Christians, Jesus is the incarnation of God. The human form of the divine, walking around on the earth, dispensing advice. Arjuna, you need to fight. Christians, you shouldn't, do all these other things. So when there is a human form of the God, when there is an incarnation of God, devotion becomes much easier. There is a being to focus on, a being whom you can love, a being to whom you can be devoted. And again, this is the path that is going to be easiest for the tamas people.
Dr. Sperry?
Yes.
It's 10:30.
Is that when I'm supposed to quit?
Oh, just
okay.
sorry about you.
All right. So the gunas are disseminated to you by Brahman. You become who you are this way, and they have both hindrances and helps associated with them. But they are not who you fully are. Who you fully are underneath is Atman. And as always, that is what you most need to realize. The surface self comes from Maya, is an illusion. You need to come to realize who you most fully are. Discipline is the way to do this. Doing your duty with detachment. I said I was going to come back and talk about what your duty is. Your duty has three major components. The first is your caste duty. You need to act in a way that is prescribed for people of your caste. So if you're a Brahmin, top caste, priestly caste, you need to do the various religious rituals and things that are associated with Brahmins. And also you need to do more scholarly investigation to know more about Brahman. Secondly, if you're a Kshatriya, what's your duty? Well, it's to fight, especially in a war whose purpose is to undo the chaos in the universe. And you'll remember the story that unfolds over the course of the Gita is of Arjuna trying to decide whether he is going to fight in this battle to undo chaos, to get the throne of the kingdom back to his oldest brother who has the right to the throne, but the cousins have stolen the throne. And so Arjuna is supposed to be fighting in this battle. It's part of his duty. There are the merchant class who are supposed to carry out business, the peasant class who are supposed to work the fields and serve people. Then there are the untouchables, supposed to do the nasty jobs nobody wants to do, burying the dead, cleaning up the sewage. Everybody has their job according to caste. There's also your duty according to ashrama, according to your stage of life. A young person up to about the age of 25, there's no real hard and fast rule on this, but these are the guidelines, is supposed to be a celibate student. From the age of 25 to 50, again roughly, you're supposed to be a householder. You're supposed to carry out business, you're supposed to have a family, you're supposed to contribute to the ordinary social running of the universe. From about 50 to 75, you're supposed to start detaching from that, go out into the forest, be a recluse, start to think more about your relationship with Brahman and Atman if you can, and then, if you make it long enough in this life, from 75 to 100, completely give up everything associated with your ordinary life and go wander the streets as an ascetic, hoping somebody will feed you. But you're becoming so detached from your regular life that you don't ask for food. Somebody has to actually give it to you, or you don't take it. And again, it's because you're trying to become more in touch with your Atman. And then third, there's also your gender duty. These duties, as I've described them, actually have a lot more to do with the male side of things than the female side of things. But you can almost imagine a chart that lays out what the duty for someone is depending on their caste, their ashrama, the stage of life, and their gender. Your job is to figure out where you happen to fall on that chart. What caste am I from? How old am I? What gender am I? And then do that duty. So, in order to achieve moksha, do your duty, but do it with detachment. Last major thing to talk about is what amount of free will you actually have with respect to taking this advice. Brahman sends out this Maya. He sends out these guna selves. You can't help the fact, let's say, that you got born with a lot of the rajas guna, the passion guna in you. You're just going to want to act all the time. Well, how much control do you have over that? Not very much. You're determined to have this passion guna in you. It's who you are. In fact, it actually seems to be the case, and there is some scholarly controversy about this. There's also some religious controversy about this, just like Christians don't always agree with one another. It seems to be the case that you're actually determined in so far as we know which actions you're going to do. You may remember at the very end of the Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, this is as the 18th teaching is closing out, quit resisting, fighting this battle. You're going to have to act. You are going to find yourself fighting this battle whether you want to or not. The world is like a giant machine. He actually uses the word machine. And you are like a cog in it. He doesn't say this part of it. But you're part of this machine. And you're going to act whether you want to or not. And you're going to act in the way that's prescribed for you to act whether you want to or not. So things are determined at the level of your actions. What role for free will is there then? Detachment. You have the option to decide how invested you're going to be in the actions you find yourself performing anyway. Are you deeply invested in getting the fruits of those actions? Or can you instead say, I guess I'm doing these actions, but however it turns out, it doesn't really matter to me. To us, that seems kind of screwy, kind of undesirable. What good is a deterministic universe where I do stuff whether I want to or not, and my only free choice is to not care about it if I don't want to? The Gita says, actually, this is the best kind of freedom. Because the actions that you're determined to do, those are the actions that your body and your guna self are determined to do. And those aren't who you really are. What you're free to do is to decide not to care anymore about the surface self, the guna self, the bodily self, and to instead focus on the Atman self. The more I become detached from the fruits of my actions, the more I'm focusing on the Brahman within me, the Atman self. And the more I do that, the more I'm becoming who I truly, really am, as well as achieving the ultimate goal of my life, and that is moving toward moksha. So, this enables us to again see how these two things come together. Knowing the ultimate reality, that Brahman is everything and that I am Atman underneath, and then seeing what my connection with that is. My role is through discipline, through doing my dharma with detachment, to freely choose to focus on the Atman self within me, the truest self within me. And the better I get at that, the higher up the reincarnative cycle I'm going to be in my future lives, and ultimately, if I really get it, I will achieve moksha. When I die, whatever life I'm in, when I finally understand it, I won't have to come back, I won't have to be reincarnated. I will spend the rest of eternity as the Atman self, Brahman, that I have been all along, and just needed to take those 68 lives to come to understand. Okay, thank you very much.